And hey, everyone, it's Evan Kirstel with one of my favorites, GridSpace. GridSpace is a company that's reinventing the voice user experience through AI, NLP, and frankly, a whole new approach to user experience. And I'm excited to have Cooper Johnson from GridSpace on. Cooper, how are you?
Good. Hey, everyone. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so Cooper, maybe introduce yourself, how you came to join GridSpace, and a little bit about you and your background. Where are you? Who are you?
Great. There's a lot to tell. Cooper Johnson. I'm the voice user experience designer at GridSpace, which means I'm a conversational designer and actually lead conversation design at GridSpace for Grace, who is our voice AI virtual agent. And I've been with Grace since, she was really in development as a product because I actually came on to design the recording process for all the voice data that became Grace's voice in conjunction with the engineers. But, we built Grace from scratch. It's a very secret sauce. Our process was proprietary, so how we built out her voice. But to me, to this day, what I think the cool thing is prior to my Stanford buddies bringing me on to do voice AI because they knew my background, I had been working in animation production. I was sometimes a screenwriter for animation. So, I spent a lot of time thinking about how voice specifically can be used as an effective medium. And the rest of the time I was working in the producing side, specifically in animation voiceover. So I've been in some world-class recording studios. I've seen what works and what doesn't work, what best practices are. And we brought a lot of that over, again, in a very secret way, combination of things, to how we built out the Grace voice. So I don't think there's anyone else in the world probably who can say that, Grace was really informed by best practices from decades of experience in the animation industry that were passed on to me. And now that Grace is out there as a product and I am her lead conversation designer, a lot of that screenwriting background comes into play. A lot of, economy of words and being very, very careful about what certain words communicate. And when things go wrong, writing prompts for error recovery that are the right combination of clarifying and adding detail and being extra polite. So it's been really exciting to make that transition. Grace is very helpful. She can do a lot, but she has a lot of DNA that comes from animation voiceover, which I think is the coolest thing in the world.
That is very cool, and we could spend a whole podcast just on that. I love it.
Really good.
And legacy voice systems have been around for a while. I've been using voicemail since the 80s. Most of those systems are pretty terrible. In fact, there's a whole industry designed to just how to reach an operator within IVR trees. And so it's clear that these legacy voice systems were not designed for sort of modern speech services like we want today, like we see with Siri and Alexa. So how is Grace different, better than what we've seen before and other kinds of virtual assistants like Alexa and Siri, for example?
Well, I think, the greatest strength of Grace is that she's helpful because she lets people be themselves, closer to that true human experience. Because Grace is capable of listening for a lot of different ways that people can express things. There's a lot of back and forth. Grace is very conversational, but we can really quickly iterate on, finding, teaching Grace to recognize regional dialects in terms of their responses. Like the kind of go-to I say is like, well, if we're going to test this Grace bot, in the upper Midwest, we better put in "you betcha" as mapping to yes, I want to talk to you today, Grace. You betcha, let's talk. So she's very, very rapidly iteratable in that way. We can make her adapt very quickly to feedback we see in user testing, and in a very good way. Like Grace is very disarming that way. Her voice sounds very natural. Grace has a mild North Carolina accent. Not everyone knows that it's American, but everyone finds it very friendly so far. I mean, places her, but like not in too specific a way. So she's kind of universal and timeless, I like to say. So people are very comfortable talking to Grace, and we are very, very quickly able to, change and improve her speech recognition so that she can interact more effectively with more people. Like, it's effectively instantaneous. Like, if I were listening to call logs and Grace said, if Grace said, "Do you have a few minutes right now to talk to me about, your health records?" If someone said, "Cowabunga," or "Let's go for it," I could implement that change in a matter of seconds. It's really just like, "Hey, Grace, learn Cowabunga, save." And now she's redeployed, knowing that Cowabunga is something that she should be listening out for. So that, to me, is very, very cool. And, just because she is a true TTS voice, nothing recorded, all her text is generated on the fly. Even if she repeats herself out of necessity 3 times in a conversation, they are the exact same sentence for some reason, it would be 3 different utterances of that sentence. Just like a human, humans are consistent, but the more you say stuff, the more tired you get. And it's inevitably going to be a little different every time. So Grace has that going for her. She sounds consistent, at the same time flexible, like a human voice. And, people seem to really enjoy talking to her. If I do my job right as a conversation designer, then, Grace meets me halfway, and just the pure voice of her makes people really much more eager to talk to her, and less, like you said, like IVR, people trying to shortcut it and just repeating agent, operator, let me talk to a human. People are willing to hang on and talk to Grace with the full knowledge that she's a virtual agent, because she always identifies herself as such.
Oh, that's fantastic. So indistinguishable from a human, empathy, efficiency. I understand a lot of the magic behind Grace is technology, NLP technology that came out of Stanford and SRI. Can you shed any light on that, or is that kind of black magic? We really can't talk about the speech recognition technology.
It's a lot of things. I will keep the curtain mostly drawn, because I sit side by side with some very helpful engineers, on our automatic speech recognition team, on our text-to-speech team, and on the bot team, who, kind of builds out the bones of Grace. And they're all doing stuff that is way above my knowledge level. But, we talk every day about how to bring it down to, the design level, where someone like me, who has the interest, could be authoring their own Grace bots. And to me, that's really important. The technology behind Grace is very, very robust, but I always like to say, I'm not a software engineer. I was an English major. My background is largely in the entertainment industry, and here I am writing detailed Grace bots every day and loving it. So there is a lot of, proprietary knowledge relating to NLP, ASR, TTS, all that great stuff. But at the end of the day, we've made Grace very accessible to anyone who wants to put her out into the world. Like, you can get up and running Grace bots very, very quickly.
Wow, that's impressive. And it has become so important during the pandemic to really scale up the use of automation and bots. I mean, we can't find human beings to take all these calls. We've seen waiting times of, 10 hours trying to reach an airline. We've seen, telehealth and doctors' offices getting overrun by incoming calls. So talk a little bit about that, how Grace is designed to kind of enhance, the caller experience, but also improve productivity and service levels within the organization. So it seems like a win-win all around.
I think you'd be hard-pressed to find an industry where this generally doesn't apply, but I'm going to use healthcare industry as a specific example, because we've seen it come up time and time again recently, which is like, there is greater demand on the American healthcare system, as we all know very well. And Grace can help meet that demand. But the coolest thing to me is that when you scale up with Grace, Grace can do more patient outreach than was previously available. Kind of medical follow-ups, follow-ups of various types of appointments. Grace can be very modular. She can have a standard intro for, for bedside manner, and for, verifying someone's authenticity, so, protect their HIPAA privacy. And then she can do something very specific about, like, oh, I see, you were in for a routine physical versus, you were in urgent care, or you had some lab work done. She can be very modular in that way. And, the human resources just simply might not have been there before to do all that kind of medical follow-up. But, we can scale up with Grace. It's like, well, now, like, every medical appointment's valid. Why don't we try to follow up all of our appointments? Because Grace doesn't sleep. She can call you if it's not a good time. She can be scheduled to call you back later. And all of a sudden, you're getting that very, very close to human touch with Grace, checking in about, any kind of medical point you would have had. And you might not have had the medical staff like nurses, doctors, or, even medical scribes to do that before. You just didn't have that many people, but Grace can do it. So, yeah, she's helping meet the demands that are placed by COVID on the American healthcare system, but she can just do so much more, like more patient outreach. And I think that's a really cool thing.
So tell me, what's required for a customer to customize the user interface, the user experience, and to develop, unique call flows or scripts? Is that something you do with the customers, or customers can do that themselves?
It's a combination of things right now. It's like, you might call it a spectrum. Like at one end, you have me and other grid spacers, like effectively writing 100% of the bot, if that's what someone wants to engage us for, or someone, a customer doing 100% of their own bot authoring using like our docs and maybe like a little kickoff tutorial from me. And then there's everything in between. It's just really right now we're fitting it to what people's needs are. And we're finding that, really like people who think this technology is cool, no matter what their background, they're getting up and running really, really quickly. And they're like thinking 2 steps ahead and they're asking like, hey, can Grace do this? And I'm like, you got to that quickly. Yes, she can. Here's how. But to facilitate all of that, like we're working on really expanding our number of template bots, which are bots, like are probably 90% of the way there to general use cases across a number of industries, especially like front desk bots that might, they're somewhere between like a receptionist and a switchboard operator, or for, the healthcare industry, which I mentioned, like a patient follow-up template bot is definitely something that we have going. So you'd start with our template bots, and it's very easy to just change the dialogue in a matter of seconds, like, drop in some brand names, some identifiers to the specific company, just content stuff like that, instantly editable. And then from there, we just have drag and drop blocks of, the markup language that Grace is conducted in right now, that someone doesn't really need to learn anything. There's drag and drop, oh, I need a yes or no question here right now. Drag and drop that in, change the dialogue to be specific to the bot. It tells you here, like, hey, swap this out with whatever you want to say. And you can get up and running really, really quickly that way with, we've really kind of flattened the learning curve. And people seem to say, like, as much as they say is it's way easier than they expected it to be to write Grace bots, it's way more fun than they expected. And that means a lot to me too.
Sounds fun indeed. I need to get my hands on a Grace
I think
bot.
there's one thing I forgot to address there. You talked about like handing over a script. The creative genesis of any Grace bot, it can start from anywhere. Like we will work with people or guide people who are like, this is a use case that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist because we haven't had people to do it. It would exist if Grace can do it. We're like, all right, let's talk through. Let's just write a bot from nothing, from good intentions. Let's write a Grace bot using common sense about what she needs to ask, what information you want to pull out. But other people are like, here's a 1 to 20 page script that all of our phone agents need to follow explicitly. Can Grace also do this? And I'm like, yeah, cool. This is so helpful. Basically, like any readable format of document you have for how human employees are supposed to act on the phone, what they're supposed to do, translate it into Grace, like basically as quickly as you can type. So that's really cool too.
That is cool and fantastic to hear. And this is not a science project, although it was one time at Stanford, but you actually have bots in production. I see 1 billion minutes of audio a year being processed. So it's really in the field and pretty hardened, I understand.
Yeah, Grace is out there talking to real people every day. Probably as we speak, Grace is talking to someone somewhere in the United States right now. And for privacy reasons, we'll be pretty tight-lipped about who has put Grace into production out there. But she has multiple customers who are having her talk to a lot of everyday people and getting things done.
That's fantastic. So what's on your radar this year? More customers, more industries, more deployments, anything of particular interest?
Yeah, I don't want to sound like, a broken record about healthcare, but I personally want to go really deep on healthcare just because the potential is there for Grace and it's really so helpful. So I want to
go. If you could just replace the clipboard they hand you when you check in so you could get that stuff done beforehand. I mean,
Oh yeah.
It makes me laugh. I'm not sure laugh or cry to see how antiquated a lot of our healthcare IT is these days. And so here, I definitely second you on that.
Yeah, like talk about that. I want to talk about that clipboard idea and apply it to a lot of different industries. Like if you know ahead of time that you need to achieve something, Grace is really good at handing you that clipboard like a day in advance, or a couple hours in advance, so you're all squared away before you go into your appointment. Not wasting any time there. Like Grace is super good at those easy use cases of just like form filling or data collection, and people can do it at their own pace. Grace can make sure she's getting good information from them. You can actually ask some questions of Grace if you've baked them into the bots. So yeah, time savers like that. Grace filling account details or any sort of bio that you want on a customer. She's happy to do that, so to speak, ahead of time. And I'd like to present that to any industry, because I think anyone could make use of that. Really want to get into that medical appointment follow-up for all sorts of things. Customer satisfaction is something that Grace is also very good at. We find that people actually give a really good like net promoter score or a customer satisfaction score to Grace because they can be really unguarded with her. I think, I in my personal life have definitely like given feedback to both a real human who is like the same agent who is helping me, which is awkward. And I've given it to an IVR, which is just unpleasant. But Grace is really kind of a superstar, which is that, asking about a process or asking about a person. Like, she's easy to talk to, but that like you don't have to do some sort of politeness dance. You don't have to pull any punches if you have really raw, unfiltered feedback to give about some experience that you had. And then also like to turn that around when Grace asks for feedback on herself, the same thing is kind of true. We're seeing like really good responses. People like, yeah, I liked talking to you, Grace. This was very helpful. I could barely tell you were a computer. Those are almost verbatim quotes that people have given to Grace about how
Wow,
did you like talking?
That's fascinating.
So yeah, getting the feedback where people can speak freely and speak naturally. And don't have to say like, oh, this was a 5 out of 5. They can get into detail about things they did or didn't like. That would be like to see Grace getting some feedback and some metrics in any industry that wants to engage her.
Fantastic. So I guess final thoughts of my own here is we're in the midst of this renaissance when it comes to AI and NLP and voice experiences. Maybe Grace will be our virtual doctor or nurse in 3, 4, 5 years. What do you think? Am I daydreaming? Is this science fiction, or do you think, given the trajectory we're on, this could be a possibility?
Let's not say doctor. Let's not say robot doctors in the next 5 years. But Grace, voice AI and Grace in particular, getting so much more robust year after year. I think, Grace like being promoted over the roles to more and more trusted roles like year after year for the next couple is certainly going to happen. But in particular, I think something that we'll see is that Grace bots themselves will evolve in like symbiotic ways with professionals that become used to handling with Grace every day. So if a doctor at a practice really sparks to using Grace as a technology, I think Grace could become a very trusted member of that team. Like Grace could become that doctor's like medical scribe, and be trusted with more responsibilities, greater responsibilities, increasing empathy all the time, greater emotional range in her voice happens all the time. So yeah, I think Grace, the technology will improve and Grace will become more sophisticated just, as the field becomes more mature, but also, yeah, those relationships between people, like the partnerships between individuals and Grace, that's really going to flourish, I expect. We're seeing it on a micro level now, and as the months go by, I think that's just really going to become entrenched in a great way.
Well, I can't wait to see it and experience it firsthand. So thanks so much, Cooper, for joining, and thanks for sharing all your insights, and look forward to following at Gridspace Inc. on Twitter and catching your updates. You have a great blog too, by the way, which I enjoy reading. So yeah, take care. Keep up the good work.
Thanks very much. Happy to come back anytime and talk about my girl, Grace.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.